Welcome back once again to Small Caps, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Kerry Stevenson, and I've asked Mike Hudson, he's the Managing Director of Southern Cross Gold. The ASX code is SXG. Now, Mike and I last spoke in, I think it was late November in last year. So I've asked Mike to come back on. Why? Well, since we spoke, they've had a capital raise, they've got some assay results out, and Mike's grown a beard. So, ladies and gentlemen, what happens over Christmas? They all go quiet, they grow beards. If you like the beard, should the beard stay or go? Comments below. It's very technical, I know, but, beard to stay, beard to go. Yes or no? Down below. Mike, had to make mention of it. Good to see you. Beard and all.
Hello, Kerry. Nice to see you again. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you. We can keep saying that up until Australia Day. Now, Mike, one of the things that I think is important for people to know is that your projects are in Victoria. The Sunday Creek project, it's delivering widths and high grades that's not traditionally been seen in Victoria. I want to go into that, but before I do, given this is the start of 2023, let's just do a high-level overview of what you achieved in 2022, then we'll come into 2023.
Okay, so we listed the company in May, and by the end of the year, we were the third most successful IPO in Australia for 2022. So it was a bloody good year in that respect, and that was on the basis of some very good drill results that just continually knocked it out of the park. And I'm the optimist in the room when it comes to geology and trying to find the angles, and this project kept on making us look smart. So we drilled. We've released up the hole 52 now. We'd released up the hole 50 at the end of last year. We started at hole 27. So there's 23 holes that we put out on the market. And we doubled the depth or tripled the depth of the project down to 800 meters. We've drilled it over 800 meters of strike. We've demonstrated that the footprint is very large. We've demonstrated that there's significant grades over half to 2 to 3 meters, multiple ounces. We've demonstrated that it's a significant antimony byproduct. We've demonstrated that the dream is to find another Fosterville, and we've demonstrated how these epizonal systems transition at depth, and that's what this project's doing. So some of the deeper holes there, the antimony's dropping off, and we're seeing much thicker veins with no antimony and visible gold. So I think where we are now is, one challenge begets another, and we had such a great year, but we've raised that capital. So now we've got over 18 million bucks in the bank, and we've got 3 rigs drilling today. We progressively went from 1 to 3 rigs last year. We're looking at bringing more rigs on. We're fully funded to execute on the strategy, and the strategy is to make this thing much bigger. We're going to go further at depth along strike, and we're going to drill the 10 kilometres of strike that remains undrilled. So last year has demonstrated a great project, and our challenge this year is threefold, I think. See how big it can get, and that's number one, right? We're going the Lassonde curve, value through exploration.
Okay.
Number how can it hold together? How can it hang together? And I think we've got to demonstrate that further as we drill more, and we've got an idea, of course, how it hangs together because we're becoming better and more predictable. And then number 3, I think, is just working in Victoria, overcoming that Victorian lethargy, and how can this thing ever become a project? And we've got to demonstrate that. Of course, we won't demonstrate it in 1 year. That's a multi-year exercise, but we still need to demonstrate just a pathway on how we're going to advance this project.
How do you demonstrate that pathway, and how difficult is it to get into getting this project underway in Victoria? Is it an easy jurisdiction, or because Victoria, as you said just a moment ago, you've got Fosterville mine down there, so they certainly understand mining. How pro are they about this particular project, where it is? How difficult is it going to be to get, I guess, it underway?
No, nowhere's easy. That I know, number one.
Yeah.
So I don't think there's such thing as an easy jurisdiction. There's easier jurisdictions. I don't think Victoria is an easier jurisdiction, but there is a viable mining industry here. There's been more gold here produced than there has been for 100 years. So we've got 3 operating large scale or medium to large scale gold mines, 2 of the highest grade gold mines on earth, being Fosterville and Fosterville. It depends where you are in Victoria, and it's it's a very bad analogy, but if you go to Mexico and explore, you really want to know which part of Mexico you're in. You're literally along the border where your life's at risk, or you're down in other places that are more mining friendly. If you go to Argentina, you've got to be in those specific provinces that will permit mining. Forget about the prospectivity. And so there's a few provinces. And Victoria, chop it up in a little bit more detail, is very similar. We deal with 3 landholders. 1, ourselves, because we own 350 hectares. 2, it's a family who used to own quarries in the area, and 3 is the state government. So 2 out of the 3 landholders we deal with over that 10-kilometre strike are direct landholders, notwithstanding there's lots of people around the district that we need to deal with respectfully, I should say, but on the ground footprint where we're drilling is 3 landholders. So that's one thing. And then working the strategy at the federal level, so that we do have antimony, which is a critical metal, which Victoria, and it's this the antimony triangle I heard Richard Morrow use today on LinkedIn, and we've got other peers, including Fosterville, which is the 5th largest antimony mine on earth today. So we're not the only one, but we actually are, as a group, one of the few places in the Western world that can provide a supply chain outside of China and Russia, which controls 82% of production today. So playing, if you that's not the right word, but playing the critical metals game without a doubt is very real, and getting government support at that level from a critical metal point of view. And then the other side of the coin, which is more important than anything, is just making sure that that grassroots level of social acceptance around the project is there. If you lose that, everything's gone. But if you have that in isolation, that doesn't work either. And then coming with those 2 levels and working to the state level.
And so all of that's happening at the moment. I picked up on something you said then about sort of the local, the people and working within the communities. Any issues there, or are they pretty pro what you're doing and what's happening there?
Yeah, it even comes down to which side of the Hume Highway you're on. If you're on the eastern side of the highway, it's generally traditional farming families. We bought from a family that had been there for generations and had the original titles. So the other side of the highway is generally more cottage farming, smaller blocks, sort of the 180-acre blocks, and people commuting into Melbourne, which is very different than the larger scale thousands of acre blocks. So we are on the right side of the freeway, even just at a local level. I would say, and people will look at this interview around the site, that I can say hand on heart that we have great majority of support, and we work very hard to try and inform people what we're doing. We're only exploring, of course, so we've got to take people through the journey as what we're finding becomes a reality, which it has over the last 6 months. So we work very hard to integrate ourselves into the community, and we've got a community reference group, and our general manager, Lisa Gibbons, is a very experienced geologist and well recognised in the industry, but she lives on the tenure. She lives on the permit. She lives on the tenement. So she knows and understands and goes to school with a lot of the local, the parents of the who live and work around us. So we work very local with the municipality. I was born and bred in Kilmore, 5 generations. So after 25 years of being a foreigner, I'm back amongst my tribe too, which does count for a lot, I think, in terms of just understanding how people's minds work. So it's a very important aspect, but our job is to make this bigger, but it's no good making it bigger if we're basically upsetting the local people, which is what we work very hard to make sure they're coming along and seeing the opportunities that will be created.
You've had one of the things you said a moment ago is the 3rd best IPO in 2022. And it seems to me, I mean, that when I spoke to you in late November, your share price was about 60 cents. And look, it's not all about the share price, but it certainly helps. Today I'm speaking to you and it's in the 70s. So it's had a nice, strong, not only start, but continuing. Is that due to the high grades of gold, or do you think it's the gold plus the antimony that's helping strengthen and bolster that, I guess, what's the word I'm looking for?
Valuation.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the antimony has very little to do with the valuation, because they say that antimony is the most critical metal you've never heard of.
Yes, exactly.
And so who really knows how to value that, and who knows that 1% antimony is equivalent to 1.58 grams of gold and that kind of thing. So it's very hard to get the value. I think people understand perhaps having a critical metal component is important in a gold project. I think people understand that high level, but it's all about the gold, and gold will drive the economics of this project. And it's all about whether this can be the next, essentially the next Fosterville. And we've got the footprint, we've got the grades, we've got the hope, if you like, that the project's transitioning at depth as we're starting to put in a lot of more deeper holes and seeing that antimony actually drop off and going into free gold zones that made Fosterville. So, the dream here is to make a multi-million ounce discovery, and that's what the valuation, I think, is on the back of, and on the back of the very good results that have continually flowed from this project over the last 6 months.
Mike, you're a geologist by background. You mentioned Fosterville. As a geologist, why do you feel that this could be another Fosterville?
Yeah, I'm even looking more like a geologist with this beard than ever before. But it is pretty clear in Victoria, there's two orogenic events that formed the gold, and Victoria, there's only two gold fields that matter in Australia of any significance, and that's the Golden Mile and the Victorian goldfields. And Victorian goldfields have produced 80 million ounces. They rank worldwide, and it was sort of forgotten. We know that it built the history of Australia and the English expansion of the English Empire, but it sort of was, well, that was the old timers, wasn't it? And never really put it into modern terms that it's a significant global goldfield. Now, most of that gold came from these mesozonal deposits, which are Ballarat and Bendigo, and the old timers loved to crush up that quartz and pull out the nuggets of gold, and it was easy. They've proven failures over the years, and it was one of the reasons Victoria was on the nose for so long. If billions of dollars haven't been spent trying to redevelop those goldfields, it would have been $2 billion, right? It was Western mining from the 70s, etc. So come this other discovery of this other style, it's been well documented in academically, but it's really been only from 2016-17, I'd say, that the opportunity for the mesozonal style 75 million years later came about. And you've got to have that event forming a gold to find another Fosterville. Now, the host rocks are slightly different at Fosterville. They are in the older rocks, but 95% of these epizonal deposits form Fosterville and East, and there's a good reason for that. There's an underpinning part of the crust that is the source fluid for these deposits called the Selwyn block. That's more theory. It doesn't really matter what it is, but it does compartmentalize them. And then the same chemistry, the same veining, the same timing, is pretty much one-to-one. So if any geologist who knows Fosterville very well can look at Sunday Creek or Costerfield, that manifests itself slightly differently, as they all do, but it's the same event forming the same gold in a slightly different way. But you want to be in that event. And so, we see Fosterville and Costerfield getting better at depth, and that's what the prediction is here. And we're starting to see those indications also. And you can just see our hit rate as we've got deeper. It's getting better.
Talk to me about the latest announcement that you've just come out. I think it's holes. Since we last spoke, you've completed hole 50. that correct?
That's correct. We went, I think when we last spoke, we had the first 300 metres out, and then it became 500 metres of mineralisation. In mid-December, we announced the rest of the hole, and then we've just announced hole 51 and 52. The detail is that, well, it's really important to understand just how the mineralisation works and how we're now testing it, I suppose, and how those results fit in. So there's an east-west zone that's 50 to 100 metres thick, and that we call the Dyke breccia. That's a big structure that extends for 10 kilometres through our field. We've drill tested 800 metres of it.
Wow.
That's the host position.
Okay.
That's the host horizon. It's really very clear, and it's 50 to 100 meters thick, and it goes to depth. We've tested it now to 800 or 900 meters, right, in that range. So we know it continues, and these deposits should continue to depth. They're not like epithermal deposits that only have a little window of a few hundred meters that you can look within. These things, as Fosterville's done, they're getting down towards 1.5 to 2 kilometers. So we know that east-west zone. Then we know there's a series, like a deck of cards across there that are northwest veins. So they're the high grades predominantly. It's not only the northwesters that are the high grades, but predominantly, okay? And that's a simple way to talk about it here. We've got these vein sets that when you get clusters of these northwestern veins, we call them vein sets, and they're sort of 5 to 25 meters thick, something like that. And when they come together, a number of those 20 to 25 meter zones, that's when we can get our plus 100 meter thicknesses, because the vein sets are so dense. So when we drill east-west, we're at a high angle to the veins, but within that Dyke breccia host. That's what hole 50 was. So it just continued to go through the host position, and as it went to depth, we can't even understand yet why it just stayed for half a kilometre in that mineralised host in an east-west direction. And we hit 13 vein sets within that, some extremely high grade, and you can go back and have a look at your listeners at those. And we only knew one of them. So we only knew one of those 13. So we found 12 new vein sets in areas that we hadn't seen mineralisation before at all, because it had never been drilled. Then in going further east of that drill hole, we've got the Apollo area where we've drilled traditionally. And there's probably 6 main vein sets at that 20 to 25 metre thickness each. The 2 most recent holes we've drilled, 51 and 52, were at the furthest extremities of the drill area in Apollo, and I'm off the chart here. And they were drilled across the high grades, but also across that east-west dyke, because they went from the northwest to southeast. So by definition, they're not going to get the thicknesses. They're getting across both sets. They'll be 50 to 100 metres thick. That's what we saw. We saw over 100 metres of mineralisation in hole 52 that had 3 high-grade areas within that. It was the 7th best hole on the property in terms of its cumulative grade width, and it was a 40-metre step out, so it increased the extensions of the system. So we drill in these 2 main orientations to get the discovery of the veins and then narrowing them down. So that's the way to think about how these things form. And then there's a lot more detail around structural geology and complexity, but that's simply put. So if we're drilling east-west, you've got a chance to see very thick zones because you're in the host. If you're drilling from the northeast, you'll see thinner zones, but we need to drill those northeast to southwest holes to narrow down or confirm the scale and size of the bodies. You can't just drill east-west because, one, you'll miss things, but you won't know the other dimensions.
It's pretty interesting what you're doing. Going back to you raised some money, I think it was early December, about 16 mil. What are you going to do in 2023 with the funds? Because in my research, it says you're fully funded right through to 2024. I guess, given this is the start of 2023, Mike, talk to our listeners about what you're going to be doing with the funds. And again, this is a big project. How do you know what to do and where to go next? Because you said just a moment ago, out of those 10 kilometres, you've only done 800 metres.
That's right. So we've really only a small part. And what do you want to see in a big mineral system is a big footprint.
Yeah.
Fosterville's a big footprints over something like 15 kilometres. This is over 10 to 12 kilometres. And actually, that's in our tenure. It's actually the mineral system's bigger around the edge of this granite. So it's a big mineral system. So you want to see that, and we've got a large chunk of it tied up, and we seem to be in a very good part of it from what our drill results show. So what we're going to do is basically drill, baby, drill. And that comes with 3 rigs today.
Okay.
The 4th rig we've talked about is imminent, and so we'll announce that when we can secure the people actually to drill there. But it's weeks away, I suspect. Then a 5th rig will come in time. We'll just bed down those 4 rigs because you've got to basically make sure you've got all the geologists and the machine working behind the background. So you iteratively build things up. And basically this project's got 15 kilometres that ourselves and Mawson, so ourselves pre-listing drilled, the same team drilled. So we've drilled 15 kilometres since October 2020 with mostly 1 rig, then 2, then 3 at the end of last year. 15 kilometres, and then was 5 kilometres of drilling from the 90s basically that went into it. So there's 20 kilometres in this project to date. Over the next year, we're going to drill 30. So we're going to, do 1.5 times what's already in the project. So if we've got what we've got already, we're going to see a lot more. Our strategy, I said, is that whole create value for everybody is through the Lassonde curve when you're on the start of the discovery right up to when it starts to taper off and the ounces stop coming and you start designing a project. We believe early in that curve, so we're going to drill to depth because that's where these things telescope. We're going to drill along strike. You'll see at least 1 rig move into that 10-kilometre trend over the next few months. And ideally, if the drill results continue in the way they've been, then we're going to have a very big project on our hands because we'll be drilling it over multiple kilometres down to a kilometre. So
that's what I was going to ask is how deep do you go? Because you said Fosterville is what? Is it 1.5 to 2K depth? I mean, it just keeps going. How do you know, Mike, when to stop? Because I guess the deeper you go, the more expensive it goes. And you've said to me in the past, you're very conscious of making best use of shareholder funds. How do you, as the managing director, say, look, keep going, or how do you know when to stop?
Yeah, so basically, you're never going to drill it out at depth, and probably, it will be a decade or more before you even get down there, right? Because, I mean, it just depends. Once again, we don't really know. If we find another swan zone, probably this is all hypothetical.
Absolutely.
But you may find that you put a shaft down to that straight away. Let's take Fosterville. If they knew what we know today, they would never have been mining 5-gram refractory dirt in the first few 100 meters. They would have been drilling for the swan zone. We've got the benefit of that knowledge that these systems can develop these extraordinary high-grade deposits. And would Fosterville, if they'd found the swan zone, gone down and developed down to that before they mined the refractory stuff? Who knows? But you suspect that could have been the case. We've got the benefit of hindsight and the learnings that's occurred in Victoria over the last 4 or 5 years to leverage off that. Now, if you think we're drilling at about $160 to $70 a meter, so it will it will become more expensive as we go deeper. But a kilometre hole will be a few $100 grand, 200 to 300 grand, or something like that, right? So it's not cheap. It's not cheap. But if you succeed in demonstrating gold down there and demonstrate that this is not a 1 or 2 million ounce system, it's a 3 or 4 or 5 or whatever it may be, then those holes aren't expensive. It becomes expensive when you want to start drilling it off from surface. So obviously, we'll drill in more detail in the first 500 meters, but if we can demonstrate gold to the kilometre or kilometre and a half in some holes to demonstrate the system continues, they're holes that are well worth their money. If you succeed, if you miss at depth, it becomes very painful. So you've got to really narrow it down to your best ability. You don't take Hail Marys. you take educated guesswork, and that's what geology is, basically educated guesswork.
It is educated guesswork, but you've got to have a good team around you, and I think you do kind of know what you're doing, Mike. We're running out of time, but before I do the wrap up, talk to us a little bit about the corporate structure, because it's a fairly tight capital structure. And I think it's important as we come into 2023 for us to or for you to communicate to our audience the current capital structure, what it looks like, and the funding.
Yeah, so we've got 183 million shares out thereabouts. Over 50% of, I think 53%, 52.5% is escrowed. So that's insiders, directors, and our major shareholder, which is Mawson Resources. So they own 51% of us now. That stock is escrowed until May 2024.
Okay.
So we've got another 17 months of that escrow. And I still share Mawson. So I wear these two hats. And as long as we're all in the same camp with the same outcome, it will work out well, and or work out better than it could if we weren't in the same camp, I should say. So we'll see where all that goes, but it's escrowed for the next 17 months. And we did have the approval from the ASX at IPO to distribute that stock. We chose not to at the time to give Southern Cross the best start to life. And that, how do you succeed in this business? There's a few rules. You got to find something. Number one, you've got to tell the story effectively, but you really want a very tight capital share structure with shareholders, for the most part, who share the vision. You need that liquidity, and that's where the Aussie market has been fantastic for this stock. But you don't need people just selling continuously, and that's what happens if you've had seed capital shareholders, for example, who've been long suffering, and they'll just continue hammering away at the share price. So we wanted to create a very tight structure, because if we distributed, there's some very good shareholders in Mawson. Some of the biggest institutions in the world owned 70% of that stock, but there would have been 30% Canadian retail who would have gone, what's this Australian company? And seen it as a free bonus. So we just want to make sure that was managed well. So money in the bank is, around 18 million bucks, fully funded, fully permitted, to execute on that strategy, which is simply make it bigger in a considered way.
Love that. Make it bigger in a considered way. Lots of drilling, more drill rigs coming on board. And Mike, it's been some fantastic news as we come into 2023. Let's wrap it all up, if you wouldn't mind. What are the three things that you think people should be sitting up and taking notice of for Southern Cross as we head into 2023?
I'm going to give you the three, but you always ask that, and it'll be interesting to benchmark me how those three things change or not. But I suspect I'm going to be boring, and I sort of just gave it away, right? This is one of the better discoveries in Australia, if not the globe, at the moment, and if in the gold space, and if in terms of grade, in terms of scale and scale potential, so please look at it and try and prove me wrong on those terms. So number one, it's the project and what the drill strings delivered. It's number two, having management who know not only how to handle it technically, but from a corporate point of view too. And that's all around the capital structure and raising the money with the right people. And we brought some very good institutions in, and some of the best people in the space, literally from North America, who co-own this stock now with the Australian shareholder base. So it's managing that capital structure equally as important as the technical side of things. Maybe that's three. That's the project and managing the technical, managing the capital structure.
Managing the technical, managing the capital structure. Mike, it's been fantastic to chat with you. Congratulations on what you're doing so far. Ladies and gentlemen, he thinks he might have his hand on another Fosterville. Only time will tell. It's still early days, as Mike said just a bit before. They're explorers still at the moment, but those numbers are fantastic. And right now, just my opinion, the gold price is strengthening, and I think 2023, Mike hasn't mentioned it, but I will. I think 2023 is the year for gold. So, Mike, Come back and have another chat to us in a few months' time. Let's see how those drill rigs are turning. But for now, thanks so much for joining me on Small Caps.
Thanks, Kerry.